My name is Lucy McNulty. I'm an Akashic record reader and integrative healing practitioner. Okay, I'll put it very simply. So the Akashic Records is pretty much a library. And so within that library, each soul has its own book, if you like. And so within that book, you've got all the choices, actions, experiences of that soul that it's ever had. And so people come to me when they feel stuck or limited, stuck in limiting patterns, or are wanting to create something that's just not coming in. They feel blocked in some way. So the benefit of the Akashic Records is I can just figure out what that is and be taken to the root cause to clear it, and they don't have that issue anymore. So my soul awakening sessions, which is my signature session, are split into two parts. So the first part is when I receive all the information about you as a soul. So that will go into your gifts, your challenges, your driving energies, how you can create more abundance in your life. And so I kind of see that as a cheat sheet, so people can see and be validated in the natural gifts that they hold, but they can also see their challenges and also be validated in that and know how to pivot back and to work with those challenges in a more empowering way. The second part is the intention base. So say someone comes with a specific issue, maybe it's calling in a relationship or issues around self-worth. So that's when I take that intention through the Akashic Records, and I'll be taken to the root cause of why they're experiencing that issue. And that could be current incarnation or past life. If it's past life, I'll bring through the past life story so you can really understand why you're holding that block, and then we work on clearing it. Yes, so like a lot of people on this path, I came into it through life experience. So I had complex trauma, high developmental trauma, and I used spirituality as a way to deal with that. And it was actually denying what I experienced. So I was essentially spiritually bypassing. So because of that, my body started to show the results of what I'd experienced. So I was diagnosed with narcolepsy, which was very intense as a 17-year-old. I had eating disorders since I was 9, social anxiety. I gained a lot of weight in a very short amount of time. I'd also be physically sick if a man would look at me. So there was all very bodily, physical symptoms of what I'd experienced. And it was just my mind that was trying to protect me by kind of saying that, it was all part of a spiritual plan or that kind of thing. So essentially when I came to spirituality, I wasn't using it in a healthy way. And it wasn't until I started my training in holistic counseling and trauma processing that I could actually then bring it back into my experience, and it just supercharged my results pretty much. I've actually had some great mentors and teachers, and I don't know how I find them. They just fall into my experience, and all over the world as well. So I had an amazing mentor who was a spiritual counselor, and she's based in America. There were also another amazing woman who I learned the Akashic Records from and my intuitive development, and she was around the corner from me in Avalon when I used to live in the Northern Beaches. My holistic counselling training, that was in Melbourne, so I used to fly down there to do the workshops. And it was a funny story with that holistic counselling training because I had some experiences, which I can tell you. I had some experiences where I then realised that merging the spiritual and the holistic counselling was something that I definitely wanted to do because I saw the power of it and how it can completely shift your world. And so when I was looking for holistic counselling trainings, it was actually quite hard to find them. And then I remember one day I was searching, and funny enough, it was the internet, but I felt a physical pull when I landed on this page. And the school was called the Awakening Group in Victoria, and the teacher actually used to create the curriculum for psychology degrees in Sydney, but she wanted to put all these new cutting edge modalities that were just proving to be amazing for trauma, but obviously she couldn't do it. So she started her own school, and I learned so much there, but particularly because it was group work, I had a lot of my own healing there. So I would do a lot of the demos in class, and I was obviously the youngest, and so it just felt like this amazing kind of healing experience where people saw me in the pain that I had because I denied it for so long. I didn't tell anyone about what happened to me. And so friends when I finally told them. I remember one girlfriend of mine at the time, she said, I would never have imagined that happened to you. And I was like, yeah, that was the point.
Can I ask what happened to you, or it's too personal?
No, it's fine. And I think it's important because, you know, when you grow up in that kind of way, knowing that other people have that experience as well is important. So I had a great childhood on one hand, but then on the other hand, it was very chaotic and very scary at times. So my parents got divorced when I was 6 months old, and my father was abusive to my mother. And so with that, he had his own mental health problems, his own trauma, you know, it trickles down, it's generational trauma, but he also had addiction issues. So he was very unpredictable, and it was pretty much my sister and I kind of fending sometimes for ourselves when we were there. So yeah, it was just, I didn't feel safe whatsoever on earth with family, with men, and it was not just physical, but the mental and emotional. And I think, you know, it's very common for children of complex trauma to think, this didn't happen to me, this happened because of me. And because they feel powerless and, you know, they're so loving, they want to fix it. So the easiest way to fix it is to make it something wrong with yourself, and then you can fix that. So that was really the mentality that I think I took into my healing in my first years. And obviously healing's a journey, and you have so many learnings and realizations along the way, but it was so interesting because I had come to spirituality first when I was 16, and I had learned all these spiritual concepts, and they were like my saving grace. And so, you know, I was like, I planned this, I know that everything's supposed to be happening, it's all divine plan, but that was just keeping me intellectualizing what had happened to me and not actually feeling or processing anything whatsoever until my body just showed me that enough was enough. And that happened when I went to London when I was 21. And I was all alone. So there was nothing to really buffer what I was actually had experienced, and it all started bubbling to the surface, and I felt so alone. You know, I didn't know how to control this weight that I'd put on, the narcolepsy, I was having chronic nightmares and sleep paralysis, and it was just horrible. And I remember being on the floor in this dingy flat in East London. I think there was probably just a couch and a bed. It was it was not good. And I was on the floor just pleading with something else, being like, please help me, I will do anything, like just help me change this experience, because I was not enjoying it too much. And that just feels like such a pivotal moment. I completely can remember exactly that point, because after that, weird things started to happen in my life, and people came in who I found really supportive. I started working with that spiritual counselor, and when I started working with her, you know, being 21 and a classic student, loved research, I was like, I'm gonna nail therapy. And so she was asking me, you know, all the normal questions about your childhood, and so I kind of told her, and I said, but you know, it makes complete sense, like, you know, I picked this experience. And she interrupted me and she said, I know you're intelligent, but I didn't ask you what you thought, I asked you how you feel. And when she said that, I just burst out crying. And when I worked with her, the main precipice of what we did together was just feeling, like, because I had never let myself feel, because I was trying to keep myself safe within my mind. And so I was shifting every week with her, like everything was coming up, and I definitely had an awakening because I had my intuitive gifts come online very rapidly, and I would see everyone all connected, and I've always been bubbly, but I was just so joyous. It was this heaven on earth moment. And I was in that for about 2 weeks. And I remember a friend of mine saying, you know, we always knew you were bubbly, but you're just so joyful, it's kind of annoying. And I was like, oh, sorry. There was nothing I could really do about it, but it just felt like nothing could hit me. And I used to have social anxiety just going to the shops, and when none of it happened anymore, particularly with the body image issues, with having had eating disorders for such a long time. I remember when I got into healing and thinking, okay, this is how I can create change and how I can give some sense of power to myself. And I thought, but it's going to be really hard to love my legs, because they were my part. And I thought, to attain what I want and to attain this self-love, it's going to be so hard. And I remember I was sitting in a coffee shop, and I was in this divine state, and it just clicked, and I loved my legs so much. I loved every single part, and it was so easy. I thought this was supposed to be really hard. And it was like, you know, loving a baby. It just happened so naturally. So when all of those things happened, I thought, okay, there's definitely something to this, and I need to explore it further. So that was kind of my entrance into this work. I think definitely the most interesting thing is the existence of the Akashic Records. Naturally, I'm a very skeptical person, which is quite funny. And it was only through these experiences that I could put my own evidence on what I was experiencing that I began to trust more. And then obviously working with so many clients and having no idea who you're sitting down with, but having all this knowledge about them, and then that being reflected back to you as completely accurate, you do develop a sense of trust in this thing that you're not really sure what it is. It's very elusive, it's not physical, but it is really just that relationship with trust and that evidence over time that there's so much power within it that we have access to if you actually trust it and kind of let it work for you. A very transformative story was related to my narcolepsy, and I got diagnosed with narcolepsy when I was 17, and I was told that I'd have to go on stimulants every day for the rest of my life. And I'm quite a sensitive person, so coffee even at that point was a no-go. So being told that I had to go on stimulants, I didn't even take one. But through obviously the trauma work and the holistic counselling, I found some improvement, but it wasn't until I did work in the Akashic Records that actually I just don't experience any of those symptoms anymore. So pretty much in the Akashic Records, my teacher at the time took me through it, and she found a block that was created in this life when I was younger and obviously experiencing very traumatic experiences, and I just wanted to escape. And so I would essentially astral travel to somewhere else, and that's kind of what was happening. I was just dissociating all the time. So then when I cleared that block, I didn't have that anymore. And then when I also compared that with the trauma work, I could come back into my body and not dissociate. But I never knew what it was like to be in my body until I was 24. And I dropped in and I thought, I've never experienced this before.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so once I cleared the block around where I was kind of constantly going off, once that block was cleared, I didn't have the symptoms of narcolepsy anymore. Mm-hmm. And it was years. So for at least 2 years straight, I would have chronic nightmares for hours, and I could recall all of them, and they were just really intense and very dark things. I would wake up feeling like a bus had hit me, and then throughout the day I would be constantly falling asleep at school. On the bus, my head would be banging, and it was like you're being unplugged by the root, like the power's just going, and I could feel it happening, and I thought, oh no, and you have no control. And so you just feel physically ill, and you know, sitting on a lounge, not going to happen because you'll fall asleep, and then you get scared to sit on the lounge. So yeah, glad that one's gone. I love the mission of Bodhi, and I think it's so important to make holistic therapies accessible to the mainstream. When I came to this work, I had no idea what it could help me with, and it wasn't until I just gave it a go thinking I have nothing to lose because I was so desperate that everything just started to unravel for me. And really, I would not have the same life that I have today without holistic therapies and without unconventional ways of working, because the power within that has just completely shifted my life. I mean, it's so corny, but healing is possible. And I can say, because when I was in the depths of experiencing what I've always been intuitive, so I knew there was a time in my life, way in the future, wasn't actually that far in the future, where I wouldn't experience these things and I would be free from this kind of prison that I felt like I was in. I just didn't know how to get from A to B. And I think that's the amazing thing with platforms like Bodhi, because they give you vetted practitioners who can help you get from A to B. All you need is the help and the support to show you the way, but healing's definitely possible, and A is not the end of your story.